Alright everyone, it's been a while since I've made a video on this Mazda. I did start a few videos and I didn't think they were good enough to warrant a video or enough to make a full video from. But I'm at a point now where I'm about to weld on the suspension mount. I've fabricated it off camera mostly. I could make a video on that, I probably won't, but if you want to know how I worked out the panel and stuff, let me know. I've refitted the jig I made in one of the first episodes on this series so that I can line up where to weld the suspension mount. I have actually made a slight mistake, which I'm going to take you through now. These are the three pieces of the suspension mount, the three main pieces. There is another piece, but it's more the chassis leg. These are three complete pressings that I've made from scratch with templates that I worked out. This one these were made using the Vice press brake that I made in a previous video. This was a little more complicated. I had to make some form tools. Made this with an old bolt cut down the middle. An old Honda head bolt actually, because that gave me a 10mm outside radius. That's a test bend that I made, just to test it. I made another form tool for the Vice. It's not the best though, but it did the job. It got me that there without too much chew. These parts were panel beat out, and it fits together like so, and that's the suspension mount for the vehicle. The problem is I've made these parts exactly, and I didn't allow for any errors in what I've done so far, which I didn't originally plan to, but then I got carried away and drilled these holes, and I was going to wait and use the jig to line up where to drill those holes, and I didn't, and it turns out they need to be 7mm further down. So I'm going to weld them up and re-drill them. Unfortunately, I've already welded the nut on though. But it was very difficult to figure out how far anything was out until I'd done that, until it was all bolted up. So it's not a terrible mistake, but I'll show you on the car now how far it's out. Right, this is it on the car, and this is bolted to the jig, which is nice and solid. The problem is the gap here. The distance that way is perfect. The distance that way doesn't matter because I can weld it on anywhere. It's just that gap there and in there, that's the problem. I could bend things and make it fit, or I could remake these with a longer distance in there, but all I'm going to do is just weld these holes up and drill them where I should have drilled them in the first place. It will mean that one of the holes is quite close to the edge. There'll still be about 4mm of metal there at the edge, past the hole. I think it'll be enough, and it's the one panel that's sandwiched in between two other panels as well, so I'm sure it'll be fine. It's more of a reinforcement than the actual bolt locator. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm not too bothered that it's out. I know these bits are very accurate. This bit's pretty good too. All it means is that in all the panels that I've put on, and all the panels that I've attached to those panels, and all the eyeballing that I've done, because I pretty much just eyeballed it that way and eyeballed it that way, it's only ended up 7mm out. I've measured it, so I'm pretty happy with that. It's to be expected, and it won't affect things in any way really. It'll still be nice and strong and everything as designed. They're probably not made that accurate in the first place anyway. 7mm is a bit far, but I'm okay with it. That's fine with me. I'll just have to, like I said, drill this hole slightly differently. It won't hurt. Right, holes drilled, nut welded back on, and back to where I should have been in the first place. My next problem is my jig didn't take into account this mounting for the sort of subframe stroke brace thing that goes on under here. And I can't fit the brace at the same time as the jig that I've made, so I'm going to have to. I think the best way forward is to tack weld these on temporarily, fit the subframe brace, mark out where the hole needs to be for that, fit the stud in, and then unweld this, then fit the stud in, and then put the jig back on, line it back up again, and then weld it on properly. So a bit long-winded, but you need to do these things to get things accurate. Yeah, it's tricky making a suspension mount from scratch, but it's got to be right, otherwise the car won't drive straight, or it'll sit wonky, or the handling will be all over the place. So it needs to be accurate, and the jig is accurate. The jig is the end word in this, so everything else has to work around the jig. That is the actual bit that I need to work off, and nothing else really matters as long as that's in the right place. And this. Right, now let's see if I can remove this jig without disturbing the mount too much. It only needs to be located that way and that way, so it can spring up and down a bit if needs be. You just need to figure out where to drill that hole. So here goes. Right. I have the beginnings of a suspension mount. Excellent. Looks good. There it is tacked on. There's my my scribed mark. Of course, this panel is going to need a bit of repair as well. Maybe just cut it and replace this section, or no, I think the best idea is just to remove all the welds, remove that whole panel and make a brand new one, weld that on, and soon hole saw some holes into it, and bend a piece of flat steel. That's fairly easy, that. Something I didn't notice when I was making this panel is the old one has a little half moon clearance for that stud there, so I'm just going to try and put that in this now. Something like that. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Right, I've made a new stud to replace that one. I could have maybe removed that, but I think it's just too far gone. It's pretty close. I cut the head off a small bolt, welded a washer on, then welded another washer on the top of that, filled all the gap with weld, welded around the edge and turned it down on the lathe, and it's pretty close. Obviously I can't buy anything like that. It was going to have to be made, and it's all TIG welded, so it should be good enough. That then goes in here, and that needs welding on, and then that sits in the recess there, and I think that's ready for welding on. Or welding together and then welding on. Something like that. Excellent. Just so you can get a bit more sense of what I've been making, I've clamped it on against the other side so you can see it's mirrored down that line. that's both the suspension mounts, the old one on the passenger side and the new one I've made for the driver's side. As you can see, it's pretty close. It's not exactly right. There's a couple of measurements that are a bit off, but it should perform exactly the same as stock. Right, after quite a bit of head scratching, I think I've figured out the order of operations I need to do to actually weld this on the car. These two need to get drilled and plug welded together because they always stay in the same orientation. There's no movement on those. I'm then going to have to drill or punch the holes in this that allow me to weld it to this, and the same on there. Fit the jig, line it up, tack weld everything together on the outside, then take it off the car, do all the plug welds because I haven't got a spot welder, and then put it back on the car, jig it again, and then do the remaining plug welds to actually mount it to the car. It's fairly complicated, but that is, I think, the best way I can do it. Right, I think I've worked out where all the spot welds go and where to drill the holes. I'm trying to replicate the same number and position of spot welds as the factory. I know suspension can be very finicky to things like that. I used to work in suspension testing, and one spot weld out of place or something and it can cause a catastrophic failure over the lifetime of the vehicle. I'm not imagining this car will do 100,000 miles or anything like that, but I might as well do it right. Right, that's the holes drilled. Plenty of them. I've been trying to line up the holes when there's 3 panels so that one weld will land on top of the other, as it should be, as it would be if it was a spot welder. I have thought about buying an actual spot welder, but for something to do this sort of thickness, it's prohibitively expensive for the amount of use I'd use it for, so I'll just go with the TIG plug welds. Probably just as good, if not better anyway. Well, that's those two pieces welded together. I've made a couple of adjustments to some of the places of the positions of the spot welds, welded some up and re-drilled them after trying it on the car. Here's the mount on the jig on the car, not welded but just clamped on. As you can see, it all looks pretty good, and crucially the bolt's still nice and free. It's not clamped at all, it's not tight. I think I'll need an ever so slight clamp on that top edge there, but just a fraction. It probably will end up that the bolt is a bit tight by the time I'm finished welding it, because there's a couple of bits that need knocking down as I go, just a little bit of hammering as I go and clamping. So I wouldn't be surprised if this does end up a bit tight by the time it's all welded on, but it should be very, very close to where it needs to be. It's never going to be a fraction of a millimetre perfect, but it could be a millimetre or 2 perfect, which is all I'm really aiming for. That should be good enough for the needs of this project. Some of these holes I've drilled slightly large for the spot welds because I'm going to go through 2 panels at once with the weld. The rest are only 1 panel to another rather than welding 3 panels together. So I need to make sure that they're welded fully, so I've drill them wider than they need to be, just to be sure. And then we have a few tacks holding the two pieces together off the vehicle. I did re-drill a few of these holes after I repositioned things, so some of them will get actually welded through to the other side, and some of them will just get welded up to close the hole. And there we have the three pieces welded together with a little bit of dressing off of the welds. I've left the tacks on down here because it's not getting spot welded till it's on the car, but next step is finally welding it on. Right, that's it clamped on. All looks good. Bolt's still free. Just got to weld it. Hopefully it's right. Wish me luck. Right, that's the mount welded on. And after a slight adjustment to the angle, the bolt fits perfect. No catching, no tightness, showing that the mount is in the right place. And the jig I made about a year ago now has done its job perfectly. And there's a frame fit. Oh, yep, that fits. So there we have the suspension mount. It still needs a bit of work, obviously. I need to fabricate the missing piece of chassis leg that would cover this and tie it in vertically, but that's fairly easy. The only hard bit will be hammering out all those curves, because it's quite thick material that it's made from. I think it's 2mm or thereabouts, but that's just standard welding. That's just make a panel, weld it on, nothing to worry about. All the alignment's done now. I still have the piece that I made for here to weld in, and I need to make a little piece to go on there, and then weld in the triangular piece into there, which is still perfectly okay, the old one. I don't need to make a new one of them. So I'm almost done one side. It's taken me around about a year calendar time to get to this point, although that's not working on it full time, but it probably would be a couple of months solid work. say 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, yeah, probably about 2 months, if not more. Big job, but it's starting to look like a car again. It's getting that way. I could probably put it back down on its wheels now if I really wanted. Wouldn't have much strength to it, but it probably would support the weight of the front of the car. Not a good idea, like, I'm not going to do that, but the worrying part, at least for this side, is over. And it's just really standard normal welding from here on that side. Still got all of this side to do though, but hopefully that will go a bit easier now. I've got a lot of templates and tools and stuff made, form tools and things, and there'll be a lot less head scratching because I know what I'm doing now. So yeah, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more like this, and see you next time. Well, that's those two pieces welded together. I don't even know what I'm saying here. What the